Well, empaths are energy receivers. We have a desire to help folks. We have a desire to rescue folks. But empaths have a tendency on the spectrum of compassion to be overly compassionate. So being overly compassionate actually makes empaths vulnerable. Most empaths probably are codependent. What that means is that most empaths are overly dependent on other folks to define their self-worth. And I think that to a certain extent, everyone is codependent. And it's when, like anything, when that goes to an extreme, that then it ends up doing us harm, and it ends up doing the folks that we're dependent on harm as well. Most folks haven't heard the word empath because it's not frequently used. People are much more in tune to empathy and metaphysics. So that school of thought is very, very common to hear the word empath. We hear the word empathy, we hear the word compassion, especially with the pandemic of narcissism around the world. There's a movement, thank goodness, towards empaths, what they are, and empathy and compassion. Sympathetic is understanding how you feel, and empaths is slightly different. It's actually not only understanding, but actually feeling how other people are feeling. And there's a difference between understanding how you feel and really deeply feeling how someone feels, feeling their pain, feeling their happiness as well, and really understanding that and really living in that person's shoes. And so it was several years ago that I really started getting an understanding about why I considered myself different as a child and why I considered myself different as an adult and why I felt things so strongly for other people. And now I know that I am an empath. It has allowed me to understand my vulnerabilities more as well. And it also allowed me to understand why I was a target to people with narcissistic personalities as well. Evil can be defined as lack of compassion. And even in the Bible, and all religions, people are trying to reconcile this difference between good and evil. If you lack compassion, right, that sets the stage for being evil, because without compassion, you can't be human. Without compassion, you can't love, right? Without compassion, you can't have normal human relationships with other people. You are not going to be able to supply yourself emotionally what you need to sustain yourself. So that's why narcissists who lack compassion, they target folks who can supply to them what they can't supply themselves. They want everything that the compassionate people can provide them. They just don't want to do any of the work. Narcissists raised in more loving, respectful families probably will end up on the lower end of the spectrum, where even though they're narcissists, right, it will be easier for them to control themselves. There's a rise in terrorism because there's a rise in narcissism. There's a rise in narcissism because there is a rise in abuse in families. Terrorists at a minimum are narcissists, pathological narcissists at a minimum. And now we're moving into the realm of psychopathy as well, because emotionally fit people don't become terrorists. Frequently in relationships, they use love as their camouflage. So people are taken off guard. They're groomed by males and females, even though there are more male narcissists than female narcissists. They know exactly what they're doing. They groom their targets. They go in for the kill, and they use love, marriage, to give the facade to people in the world that they're living a normal life, that they're successful, and then behind the scenes, they're covertly and sometimes overtly aggressive and abusive to the people that they've groomed and targeted. And it's frequently many, many years after their targets have been depleted that people really understand exactly what's happened to them. Narcissists find us, we don't find them. Codependency does not cause abuse. Codependency is a consequence of abuse that we acquire in childhood. And we carry it with us through into adulthood, and it makes us vulnerable to narcissistic abusers who prey on us, who target us and prey on us. And it is a parasite-host relationship. It's a predator-host relationship. Abusers find us. We do not find them. Well, there's a new definition of abusers. Now we're moving in the direction where all abusers are narcissists. We learned how to become victims of abuse in childhood. Narcissists learn how to be narcissists in childhood, right? And there's a predisposition to compassion, just like there's a predisposition to lack of compassion, right? So now there's a movement to identify all abusers as narcissists. The body isn't designed for being overtaxed with pain, right? Our pain-based emotions exist to protect us. So when we experience pain, anxiety, stress, exhaustion, those are cues in our bodies. Cues in our bodies that we're supposed to read and stop, and either thought correct, or take an action, right? Change the action or change our thought. So we thought correct or course correct. When I discovered that they were narcissists, it was a very, very sad day for me. And me personally, it was one of the hardest things for me to accept, because I thought everyone was like me. I thought people cared about people and people had big hearts and people wanted to rescue everyone like me. So my whole reality was in question. So accepting that there were evil people in the world who targeted me was a very, very difficult thing for me to understand and for me to accept. It was actually quite shocking to me. There's a genetic predisposition to compassion and empathy and lack thereof. People who are genetically predisposed to a lack of compassion become narcissists. And people who are predisposed to being overly compassionate are empaths. The folks who are exposed to abuse in childhood have a tendency to become codependents, dependent on the abusers. Narcissists and empaths themselves are both exposed to abuse, both exposed to the environmental factors. One becomes a codependent and the other becomes a narcissist. If you wanted to know if someone was a narcissist, okay, or you suspected someone was a narcissist, I can give you what I feel is the top 5 or 6 items on my personal list. Please do. Right, so first of all, typically these people are very charming. And however, they're folks who have a difficult time in relationships, okay? And you'll notice that they're pathological liars, okay? You'll notice that they frequently want all the credit without doing any of the work. You'll also discover that they have to win, and there's no win-win for a narcissist. If they win, you have to lose. In about the 1400s, with the advent of the 7 mortal sins and the 7 virtues, if you look at those lists, self-love, narcissism was considered the worst of the 7 mortal sins and the root cause of the other 6. Everyone is narcissistic. We have to be. We have to be able to be concerned about our own needs and satisfy those needs. When we start getting into medical terminology, there's a list of characteristics of folks that fall into malignant narcissism, pathological narcissism. Narcissists do not typically seek out any psychological care. About 40% of the population are reported by doctors Jane and Tim McGregor are empaths. That's worldwide. Just because someone is pathologically a narcissist doesn't mean that they don't have redeeming qualities. It is a characteristic of humanity. And narcissists have been around since the advent of time, and they will continue. They will continue forever. We empaths, we just have to learn what our vulnerabilities are and how to protect ourselves from them. Freud talked about narcissism, and several other psychologists after he did it, but it wasn't officially evaluated as a personality disorder until the 1980s, and so it wasn't officially on the books until the 1980s. And even now, there are debates as to whether this is a personality disorder or a character disorder. But nevertheless, we can't deny the harm that is done by what's considered covert, aggressive personalities. People my entire life have come up to me and told me their deep, dark, hidden secrets. That's very common for empaths, and I am an empath. And I think that if I wasn't an empath, writing the book would have been much more difficult for me, because not only was I a victim of abuse, I understand the pain, I've experienced the pain, and I have empathy for the pain. I can't tell people how to heal. That's impossible. You know, people heal at their own pace, but I can show them where to look. I went through the same issues. I had the same obstacles. And once those obstacles started coming down and the truth started flowing, I started healing. As an adult survivor of childhood abuse and as an adult survivor of adult abuse, right, the message that I would like to relay to folks is that they are the source of their healing. We are not the source of our pain. We are the source of our joy.
To describe my mom, I would say she is understanding. You know, she's the type of person that you could go to her and talk pretty much about anything and she would be there to listen. She's a great listener. She's always a people person and people go right to her. We always joke about being in stores and people gravitate towards us and they're right in our face and asking questions, and she's always talking to people and sharing her experiences. Obviously that's the empath in her. She can talk about absolutely anything, and usually it's topics about people getting help or wanting help about a certain subject. She's always coming up to me and saying, or calling me up at school saying, oh, I met this person today and yeah, they wanted help with this subject. Now I gave them my card so they can see my Facebook page or, you know, go on my social media accounts and get help. If I had to choose one word, it would probably be inspiring. You know, she's the one person that I can go to, and I definitely know a lot of people that are following her on social media accounts or wherever, have read her book, are looking to her for inspiration. And so definitely she's a great example. I heard empath from my mom. I grew up hearing this word. I'm studying behavioral neuroscience, and so it's funny, like a couple years ago in high school, my mom and I were talking about what I wanted to be. I said, no way I'm gonna be a therapist, no way I'm gonna do psychology, and now I'm studying behavioral neuroscience, and it's all starting to make sense. I'm listening to her, you know, talk about this every day and taking in her points as much as I can, and I'm only 19 years old, you know, I'm gonna be 20 in a couple of days, and so, yeah, that's all I can do. Try to listen the best I can and learn from her. I'm a sophomore in college right now, and so I'm still doing my general ed. Hopefully I'll be in either graduate school or going to medical school, and just learning any way I possibly can. She definitely has her rules like any parent would, but I think because I was never like the problem child. I never went out and partied or did anything like that, and so I think because she trusted me, you know, I never had a curfew because I was gonna be back by a certain time anyways. I'm going to school in San Diego. Whatever you wanna do, it's available in San Diego, and so, yeah, I'm definitely learning to get out there and do what I enjoy rather than just sitting in my room all day and studying. That's not what life is all about. My family is all back east. I grew up in California, and so I grew up with my mom and a couple of cousins, and that was it. For family, I depend on my mom totally. I'm cautious about who my friends are and who I communicate with, and even what professors and teachers and classes I'm taking. Yeah, it's definitely preparing me for the future, and in every situation. Obviously I don't know as much as my mom does, but I'm always trying to learn, and it's becoming easier and easier every day to pick out, who that narcissist is or who has those tendencies. We are all human. Everyone makes mistakes, and I'm sure I would at some point. My mom even says they disguise themselves. We've gone all over the place, from Europe to China to all these different places, and so I'm so appreciative, and people always come up to me and they say, "Oh, you're so lucky." I don't really think of it that way. I just think, I'm always learning, and I like to get out there and, learn as much as I possibly can. I'm just that type of person where I'm always curious, and looking things up. I'm just extremely grateful that I've had the opportunity to even travel as much as I have. I think I am an empath. I'm very cautious about who I'm friends with, and I communicate with what classes I take and who's going to be around me at any point. But I'm always very compassionate towards animals. I love animals, and try to help people out as much as I can. I'm very, very interested in psychology, and I'm kind of trying to keep my mind open. Everyone tells you to keep an open mind while you're in college, and so that's all I'm trying to do, and kind of see where life takes me. If I had to write a book right now, I probably would write about not taking school too seriously, going out there and living your life. Yeah, just taking advantage of the opportunities that are given to you. I've had so many things offered to me and I didn't take it. If I were to do it again, I would take all the opportunities given to me, and so that's probably what I would write about, and really just not studying what your parents want you to study, or just really going for what you want.
Narcissism in local politics, which is my greatest area of experience and expertise, it's an essential ingredient. It's part of the fuel in the tank in any local political organization or political endeavor. It's a very, very rare person who has the desire to serve and the ability to lead, who does not have some type of narcissistic tendency. The reality is that in order to see yourself in the rough and tumble of politics, and in order to progress and survive, you need to have that narcissistic sense of self. It's only part of what it takes, but it is an important ingredient. Now, we're talking about people not extreme narcissism, which you find in politics, and I've seen it in many, many instances over 45 years. We're not talking about that. We're talking about narcissism, the type of narcissism that can be actually healthy and that can help a person maintain and build his or her self-image and his or her sense of how they project in the community. And that in turn can help that person relate to people, win campaigns, lead more effectively, and govern more effectively.
For the most part, when you have politicians, you have to have someone that is confident in what they believe, in their ideals, and I think it can come off as being narcissistic, or you have to have a narcissistic personality to really come off and be successful. And I think that's potentially why you see a lot of politicians that are considered narcissists. Well, I think it's healthy to have confidence in government, particularly in politics, as particularly now when you have tight budgets, but you have to fight for what you believe in. And when you have someone that has that confidence, that can fight for their ideals and they can push their agenda forward, I think it's a good thing. I do think it's a positive thing. I think it's negative when, sometimes you'll see politicians that it's just all about them and not about the work that they can do, and then it turns into negative infighting with other people who may be against their agenda, and unfortunately, it can lead to negative consequences, and that's unfortunate when you see that in government, particularly in politicians.
I've been a state senator for 1 year now, and for those who I've spoke with, they've told me I haven't been involved in government and politics long enough to be a narcissist yet. So I'm very relieved about that. We'll see what the future holds. Hopefully it remains on a good trajectory. I don't think there's anything wrong with having your own self-interest, with wanting to elevate yourself in society, to see your career evolve. Having said that, of course, we always put the interests of the residents who we represent first and foremost. So if you could find that compromise between doing what's good for yourself What's good for your family, what's good for those who you represent. I think you'll make it in the business of government and politics.
I was born in Putnam, Connecticut, and raised in northeastern rural Connecticut. Very, very traditional, mill town, old history, about 4,000 people in the borough of Danielson. I learned rather young, with being an empath and being raised into a family of narcissists and a lot of dysfunction in the family, the narcissists and folks that were really suffering and where harm was being done because of the dysfunction in the families, they relied a lot on the compassion that the empaths like myself had to provide. I didn't understand that at the time. I understand that now. So they were heavily reliant on the empaths in the family, the people who were energy receivers, the people who were very, very compassionate and who had to essentially rescue the others in the family who harmed from the dysfunction in the family that was being done to. So from abuse and neglect and validation, a lot of other issues that were taking place in my family, including which was pretty much rampant abuse. School for me was a haven because I was an excellent student. So I found that the teachers were very, very kind to me because I was an excellent student. So that's really where I excelled. You know, I excelled very, very much in school. And so I didn't have a lot of experience with narcissistic teachers. I was really, really fortunate in my education not to. I knew that I had serious issues when a friend of mine said, "Why do you get so angry? Why are you angry all the time?" And that was life-changing for me because I couldn't answer the question. But as I went on and I would flash back to the abuse and flash back to the personal experiences I had, and when she asked that question, I realized that I was, angry frequently. And I was angry, but I was angry only in certain situations when I saw unfairness and I saw people, when I felt like people were being taken advantage of and people were being abused in the same way that I had witnessed when I was a child. But it took many, many years for me to discover that, to really answer the question, why was I being so angry? And I was angry because in situations like that, I was being, it was triggering my defenselessness. It was triggering the same powerlessness that I was feeling as a child. I was 16 years old and an empath. So it's very, very typical in families where there's empaths to have narcissists, and the narcissists target the empaths. We use the word scapegoat. So frequently, empaths would call on other empaths to go rescue the people who are being abused by the narcissist. So at 16, my aunt was married to a narcissist, had experienced years of psychological and physical abuse. And so when I was 16, my mother called me while my aunt was being severely beaten and asked me to go over to her home to help her out. She was a wonderful woman, and now when I look back at it, she was an empath herself, a very, very kind, compassionate, loving, empathetic person who truly loved me unconditionally, and she's one of the people who I dedicated the book to. I went, and the scene was, as you can imagine, was pretty horrific. And my aunt was hysterical, and at 16 years old, I did what I could at the time to protect her from her abuser who was in the house at the time. But I had been exposed to abuse my entire childhood, from personal physical abuse and emotional abuse myself, to seeing other people in my family neglected, invalidated, abused. And a lot of that is what drove me as an adult to seek answers, a lot of answers personally about myself, and what motivated me to write the book, Take Your Power Back. So I'd worked 35 years in totally different industry. And I'd worked in high-risk industry, nuclear power industry, nuclear weapons industry, and about a year and a half ago, I had decided to change career paths. I was just a point in my life that I wanted to do something different, and so I got certified as a life coach, and I started a Facebook page. And I'd always, on my bucket list, I'd always wanted to write a book. So I was posting at a Facebook page for narcissistic abuse survivors. So I started writing. So after I had written about 100 articles in about 4 months, the reach on my Facebook page had gone up to 52,000 people within 6 weeks. So I thought, wow. So when I took a look at the articles, I realized that I had the core to my book. So within 4 months, I took the 100 articles, I put them together. I put a front part to the articles, I put a back end to the articles, and like I said, within 4 months, the book was written. What I noticed about social media is that there were millions of narcissistic abuse survivors looking for answers, and I had been one of them. But I also noticed that the majority of those focused on the abuser. So when I started my Facebook page, I agreed to do it with a unique mission that I was going to focus on the victims. And I was going to focus totally on healing. So when I wrote those 100 articles, it was totally focused on truth, providing truth, because I, as a narcissistic abuse survivor, knew that they were starving for truth, that their souls were starving for truth. I assembled those 100 articles, my personal truth that I found were the root causes into narcissistic abuse. Traced that back, pulled the thread on that back to childhood, back to the faulty thinking, back to the pain addictions that were causing this. It was actually a program that could walk people through that would address the pain addictions, address the faulty thinking, build self-esteem, help them focus on self-care and self-forgiveness, and walk them through this process, right? It wasn't a linear process, but it was a process nevertheless that once people walked through, they could actually release those pain addictions, break those pain addictions, fix that faulty thinking, and take their personal power back and not be vulnerable to narcissists anymore, and actually would free them to be their authentic selves, the people that they were actually put on this earth to be. And I was one of them, myself. I had gone through that process over decades. And it will help folks who are empaths really be able to identify these combat tactics, these covert aggressive combat tactics that narcissists use to manipulate conscientious, empathic, kind, wonderful people who are vulnerable solely because they were abused, neglected, or invalidated in childhood. I wanted the book to be helpful, I wanted it to be practical. The most emotional part of writing the book was actually reliving the pain that I had experienced. In order for me to really write a book, that I really had to get down into the root causes, and I really had to look back at my past and map my healing itself to the book to actually validate that what I was writing was accurate, was going to be helpful, and was going to help people source, get into the sources, look back, and really address the root causes to their pain and trace it back to their childhood. So that was very difficult, and abuse was rampant in my family, so I had to go back and I had to relive those very painful experiences. It was very cathartic for me as well. To heal from abuse, we have to uncover and discover to recover. So we're actually rescuing ourselves from our own despair. In the process of doing that and rescuing ourselves, we are taking back and re-owning our authentic selves. We are actually healing because we are learning and filling all those gaps that our parents should have taught us: how to self-soothe, how to cope, how to really be totally self-reliant on our own abilities, right? And our own really truly understanding our self-worth to authentically heal and become the versions of ourselves that we were put on this earth, really put on this earth to be. I'm getting feedback from tens of thousands of people now from around the world. Thank you notes, people telling me that it's saving their lives. And it's not me who's saving their lives, it's the truth that's saving their lives. I just share truth and help folks find their truth. I show them where to look. We're born with only two fears: fear of loud noises and fear of falling. And that's it. Every other fear, neurosis, apprehension that we have, we learned. And just like we learned it, we can unlearn it. And I also point out to them the faulty beliefs that abuse victims suffer from that prevent them from healing. This book provides the answers that abuse victims have long looked for. What I hope for it is that it will become more and more popular. More and more abuse victims like myself will not have to spend decades looking for the root causes, and this will continue to expedite people's healing. This will continue to facilitate people's healing. It's not going to get rid of narcissism. That's impossible. That's part of the human way. That's part of humanity. But we, the empaths, we the good people, can bring into our level of awareness that we are vulnerable to narcissists. We can know what those vulnerabilities are. We can heal from abuse, and we can then be able to identify the characteristics, their combat tactics, their manipulation tactics. If we can raise awareness, a collective awareness, and be able to bring this into people's level of awareness, we can break the pattern of intergenerational abuse. It's my passion in life. So I always knew that I always felt and believed internally, I couldn't explain it, that I had a grander purpose in life. And now I understand it. Now I realize that the pathway that I had in life was because I had those abilities. It was because I was an empath. It was because I was resilient. Unfortunately, my aunt lost her life, but I did not, right? So I'm alive now. I'm her voice. I'm the voice of the victims. I'm the voice of the people who weren't fortunate enough to survive, but I have. And so I feel like I'm the voice, and I share that I have an opportunity. An opportunity has been provided me to help people around the world, and for that I feel very, very grateful. It's a very humbling position to be in. So if I had to sum it up, my decades worth of research, what led up to this book, this would be the message. We had the power all along, that the abusers don't have the power. They manipulate our power from us. And we do not find them, they find us. And it is absolutely mandatory that we take our power back.